So I think that has to be the most powerful thing that I've learned, is that anyone can be a leader. Anyone can learn how to lead. There isn't one personality that makes a good leader. There isn't one style that makes the best leader. And yes, there are things such as communication and, being able to connect with other humans and being able to share what the values are and have that clarity. There are things that can enhance leadership, but just that idea that there isn't one leadership style.
Have you ever wondered what it's like competing on the world stage? If so, then that is one of the wonders, one of the questions that you'll get the answer to in today's episode, as we're joined by a rare perspective on leadership, on teamwork, confidence, imposter syndrome, and a few other things besides. And that perspective comes from my guest today, who is Joey Lai, a former Olympian, executive coach now, and business owner. And Joey was part of the Canadian Olympic softball team at the Tokyo Olympics in 2020, a.k.a. the COVID Games. So she's got some brilliant insights really into how to adapt, overcome, adapt and thrive is her go-to phrase. Her experiences of teamwork, leadership, and dealing with the crisis of COVID on that big world stage as a competitor in an Olympic event. So we'll be hearing all about her career so far, what all of these things were like, as well as talking about things like confidence, high performance, what a high performing team looks like, how to adapt and thrive, and other experiences of teamwork and leadership. So it's going to be quite a unique perspective, which we always welcome on the show, and really interesting conversation as well, particularly to any Olympics or sports fans in the audience. Obviously, I'm not necessarily a sporty person myself, as I think we all know by now. However, there is definitely some important and useful lessons to learn here.
Welcome to the Leading with Integrity podcast. Leadership talk for the modern manager. With your host, David Hatch.
So I'm joined today by Joey. Thank you so much for being with us today. Welcome to Leading with Integrity. And to kick us off, feel free to introduce yourself and tell listeners a bit about your background.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm Joey Lai, born and raised in Toronto, Canada. Came to America for school, played ice hockey and softball in college, went on to coach both sports in the NCAA, and have a 12-year career with the Canadian national softball team, which ended in Tokyo at the Olympics. The COVID Games, no fans in the stands, but standing on the podium with my teammates. And it was the first medal in Canadian softball history at the Olympics, and an incredible experience to be a part of. Getting back from Tokyo, I decided to start my own business, and I'm now a speaker and consultant using all of the leadership, team culture, and mindset expertise that I have learned along the way to impact others.
It's great to meet an Olympian. You're the first I've met, so yay.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, the COVID Games must have been weird. I must say, I didn't really watch them because I was a bit in my own COVID bubble at the time. Was it odd? I imagine like everything in the COVID years, it was just kind of oddly quiet and a bit still. Did you find that weird? Was that a struggle or was it easier?
It was an interesting experience because you grow up with this dream and vision of what the Olympic experience will be like, and you're there. And it's so different. We weren't allowed to go watch any other event. And that was something that was disappointing for me and my teammates and our experience, especially those of us who it was our first time at the Olympics. Our friends and family couldn't come. There was no one in the stands, playing in empty stadiums. It was a very unique experience. And at the same time, it was, I think, a competitive advantage for our team. We were so close, and it's almost like we didn't need anyone else in order to perform our best. And our team culture was something that we had worked really, really hard on. And so the team showed up as its best. We didn't need the energy from the fans. It would have been great, don't get me wrong, but we didn't need it. And so it was a really cool experience to have with those other women and to be able to show up, be our best, make history for our country, and have those memories for the rest of our lives. You know, we weren't allowed to leave our bubble for so much of our training, and all we had was each other. So thankfully we had that bond.
Have you been back since, or?
No, and I'm thinking sometime in the rest of my life I'm going to get back to the Olympics and be a fan and have that part of the experience.
I mean, presume you get free entry now for life, right? That's how it works, isn't it?
That would be cool. I have no idea.
I guess the only way to know is to try, isn't it? But,
yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, tell us a bit more then about what it's like achieving that childhood dream, because everyone has one and not many of us actually realize it, do we? So what's it like to actually do it?
It's pretty incredible. I don't know that there are words that can describe that feeling. And whenever someone picks up the medal, it's very heavy. And people always say that. And what did that feel like when it went around your neck? And I don't honestly know, because the emotional weight of that moment was so much more that I didn't even notice the weight of the medal. And it was such a surreal feeling to be able to be standing there, even though we were looking up at empty seats, and it was such a unique moment. It was surreal to be thinking about, I've dreamt about this my whole life. And I had a teacher in the 3rd grade who had us write a letter to ourselves, and then she sent it to us later in life. And from that young of an age, I wanted to be a professional athlete. I have an autobiography that I found from high school that I titled Future Olympian. Like the dream was so deeply rooted inside of me. And so when it became real, it was just an unbelievable moment to be able to be at the Olympics, even though they were delayed a year, even though there were no fans in the stands, but just to be proud of myself and my teammates. We did it. We achieved our goal of first qualifying and bringing home a medal. I mean, we wanted the gold one, of course, but we were still able to make history for our country. And there are no words to describe how amazing that was.
Yeah, I mean, just that childhood dream aspect of it is really interesting to me, I must say. And yeah, I almost envy you for being able to achieve that dream as well. I mean, mine was to be a fighter pilot, and unfortunately the eyesight said no. So I know, right? Anyway, so you have a slogan as well, I know, because I've seen it on your profile, and it is adapt and thrive. What's the story behind those words, and how do they impact what you do today?
Adapt and thrive came into my life while training for the Olympics, and it just was one of those slogans that hit me as, oh my goodness, yes, everything that you try to achieve in life, there are going to be obstacles, there are going to be challenges, there are going to be things that try to deter you from achieving your goal. And the people who come out on top, the people who end up achieving big things, have figured out how to navigate those. They expect challenges. And so when I started facing those challenges, such as a delayed Olympic Games, or in more simple terms, not wanting to go to the gym, or something being closed down, gyms being closed down during COVID, and adapt. How can I adapt? Can I figure out a different way that is going to allow me to overcome this obstacle and ultimately thrive? And oftentimes when those challenges come at us, we figure out a solution that was better in the long run anyway. And we do end up thriving and coming out on the other side even better than we were before. And so when I adopted that, it just allowed me to almost be open to challenge. And instead of spiraling in the disappointment that this hard thing was happening, just those simple words allowed me to think a little bit differently, have a new perspective, and navigate that challenge in a whole new way. And so it became my slogan for life and now for my business. And, you know, I set out to help other people adapt and thrive and have that kind of a mindset in their own lives.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. That hadn't occurred to me, actually, the whole COVID and the closing of gyms. That must have been quite an adjustment. And particularly in the earlier part of it, because I mean, a lot of people were quite scared of it. You know, we didn't know what to expect. We didn't know what it meant even. And it could be quite stressful just even going to the shops. But when what you do depends on being able to go to places like the gym or the track, I guess, and similar things. And they're all suddenly closed. Yeah. And I suppose as well, the year's delay must have had a massive impact on mindset.
Yes, absolutely. Waking up every morning and seeing another new article about how the Olympics were going to be canceled altogether, and still getting out of bed and with the same intent, getting the work done and training as though they were going to happen, because what if they did?
Mm.
And I wasn't ready. That would have been the biggest regret of my life. And so our team actually came out better. You know, I talked about how oftentimes when we face those challenges, we figure out ways to be even better. When our team walked away from training together, we said, see you in 10 days. And it was 10 months later that we came back together. And we were so much better. Every single person on that roster got so much better during the year delay. It was insane. It was eye-opening. It was mind-blowing how much better we got. And so we did adapt and thrive through that time and figure out how to navigate the gym closures and how to navigate training during that time. And it's a pretty incredible thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the what ifs they're always interesting, but not always useful, I find. But it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Like, if COVID hadn't happened, maybe that's why you managed to get as far as you did. Maybe you wouldn't have done it otherwise. And yeah, I think that's a nice way of reframing it, isn't it?
Yes, yes.
Yeah. And I think there's quite a lot of businesses as well had a similar kind of experience. Like, it would have been quite a daunting and sudden and unexpected a change over which we had no control. And yeah, I think there's quite a lot of industries even as a whole where actually COVID's turned out to be quite a good thing.
Yes.
A lot of people are quite upset about remote working still, and all the controversial, the return to the office, all of that sort of thing. I don't like calling it return to work because I feel like that's a bit harsh on people. But
yes.
Yeah, but I think there's quite a lot of industries actually, they've saved huge cost by not having to have an office anymore. They've got happier staff, happier workers because they have a better, again, I don't know how I feel about the phrase work-life balance, but it is the phrase, isn't it? That's what everyone understands when you say it. And I do think it can be a competitive advantage now. We'll see how that plays out, I guess, in the next decade or so. But yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it, I think.
Yes.
And I much prefer adapt and thrive to the old cliche of expect the unexpected, because I always found that a bit like, how do you expect the unexpected? It's by definition unexpected. Yeah. I'm overthinking it, I know, but anyway.
That's awesome. Well, feel free to use adapt and thrive as you move forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. Tell us a bit more then about your business and the work you do today, and what made you decide to go from being an Olympian to working with businesses.
After the Olympics, I had kind of that cliche post-Olympic depression, if you will, and just kind of sat in my feelings and thoughts of what purpose do I have now, and what do I want my life to look like moving forward, and really did some soul searching and figured out that what gives me passion, or what I have passion about, is impacting others. And how can I do that on the biggest scale possible? And that's when I decided to start my own business and travel the country and connect with people all over the world, honestly, to help them figure out their challenges in leadership, their challenges in mindset, their challenges in culture within their teams and companies. And so first I started by leveraging my friends, because why not? And a lot of them are still in coaching. And so their schools have been so amazing in hiring me and helping me gain that experience and impact those students. And I've moved a little bit more into corporate now, and it's unbelievable how many lessons from sport translate to the business world. And so I am working to create a mastermind for executives that allow them to really dive deep into culture, improve buy-in, employee retention, and ultimately the bottom line, and help those leaders really lean into their strengths authentically and become more confident and bold leaders themselves. So there are a lot of different, I think, avenues I can take my business. I'm still pretty new, and I'm excited about all of them right now, impacting leaders in the business world, impacting leaders in the sport world, impacting teams, and helping people build that culture.
This might be an unfair assumption on my part, but I feel like particularly with a team sport, there's massive lessons, and I can see how that relates to the business, because it's got to be, the successful one. It's about high performing teams ultimately.
Yes, absolutely.
And I feel like that's more relevant than, say, a lone sport where you're not part of a team. Maybe that, as I say, is an unfair assumption, but
I think having been only a part of team sports, in my experience, I can't really speak to how different it would be on a single athlete venture. But you're right. The communication you have to have, the teamwork, the understanding of other people and how different we all are and operate and communicate, and to get everyone to buy into a common goal and to work towards that common goal, and to understand how important their role is, even though it might not be the role they want at that moment. And so, yes, there are many, many nuances in team sports that I think can directly relate and impact to the office.
And what do you think it is that is the key to a successful collaboration in a team environment?
I think where being in an environment where every single person feels as though they are contributing, and there's clarity in their role, what's expected from them, and in how to communicate among one another. I think the most common thing I see or hear from businesses and from teams is there's a lack of clarity. We have values. We know what our values are. What do those values actually look like in action? And can we define those so specifically that we know exactly what it looks like?
Yes, I like that, I must say, and something that I hear fairly frequently from quite a few of very similar people in terms of their career choices. Not the Olympian bit anyway, but it's about, when you talk about values, it's, can you explain, I don't know, say the last decision you made in terms of your values and how the values inform that decision. And if you can't do that, then either you made the decision wrong in the nicest possible way, or your values aren't a correct reflection of your business and the way you conduct it. And I think that's quite an interesting way of connecting the two things. And I think it's a helpful exercise to go through as well, because it forces you to live those values or change them so that they reflect what you're doing.
Absolutely. If you're constantly making decisions that don't align with those values, then maybe they're the wrong values to have.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it also, I think, prevents or helps you avoid the trap of the values as a marketing exercise versus an actual meaningful part of your business.
Absolutely.
In terms of the C-suite, the executives that you work with, what is your dream for those people?
I have so many dreams for those people, but I think if I had to choose just one, it would be that they walk away from having worked with me understanding fully how powerful they are, how much amazing strengths they have, and how to leverage those strengths. What are those strengths, and how do I leverage them to get the absolute best out of me? And I think so often in life, we are told to really work on our weaknesses. And my philosophy is figure out what your strengths are, leverage those, and what your weaknesses are. There are other people around you who have those strengths, who have passion around those things. And so delegate those things and allow those people to lean into their strengths and lean into their passions. And so I think for those executives to really have a good, strong understanding of who they are, what they bring to the table, how to leverage those things and get the most out of their employees, and ultimately have more enjoyment out of what they're doing. Yeah,
I love that. That's a great point. I think we're so often told, aren't we? And we've all sat in those personal development interviews of like, what are your weaknesses? What do you need to work on? So no. It's important to know what they are, But that doesn't mean I'm going to spend my life trying to improve those. It's better to lean into the strengths and what you're good at. And as you say, like, there's other people who will be good at the things you're not good at.
Yes.
And that's part of a team, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And I think that speaks as well to the imposter syndrome a little bit and understanding what your strengths are. Because, I mean, there's so many people, even at like senior executive level, who've had like really successful careers that you'd never expect from the outside to suffer with something like imposter syndrome. And yet I think pretty much everyone does at some point or another.
Absolutely. Imposter syndrome is real. I would say for maybe about 11 of my 12 years with the national team, I was just looking over my shoulder, waiting for them to find out that I didn't belong to be there. I didn't belong there. And, yeah, it is real. And that is one thing that I try to be really open about too, is, you know, people often meet me for the first time or have gotten to know me, you know, post Olympic life. And they're like, wow, you must have just been confident your whole life. I'm like, no, actually, I work on that every single day. And I've struggled with imposter syndrome and I've struggled with a lack of confidence. And here are some tools to help in that area. And please know it is normal to struggle with those things.
Yeah, confidence is another common one, isn't it? I think, again, this might be an unfair assumption, but I think in my experience with confidence, it's not easy, but it's fairly straightforward to deal with that. It's, you know, it's things like practice makes perfect. I can try out all the cliches now if you like, but it's competence, isn't it? You know, you get good at something and that breeds confidence. So that it's not easy always, but it's fairly straightforward. I don't want to say simple, but it's fairly straightforward. Imposter syndrome is way more challenging to deal with though. So, I mean, how did you cope with it, if you don't mind sharing?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things for me was having a really strong support network and having, particularly my wife, you know, having a person outside of my situation that I could call in moments when I just needed that person to say, you know, you're going to be fine. You know this about yourself. Here we go. And just to be that voice, because sometimes that voice inside of our head is, we're losing to the negative voice in moments. And so sometimes we just need that extra boost. And so I think for me, knowing myself well enough that there were going to be moments that I needed that outside voice from an outside person to convince myself to get back to that positive voice in my own head. And having those people around me, you know, whether it was teammates, family members, like I said, my wife, friends, that could be that person for me. I think we're often our own worst enemy. We are harder on ourselves than anybody else. And so if we can have a strong support system around us that can step in those moments where we can't be that person for ourselves, then we're going to have that safety net and be able to bounce back a lot more effectively.
And it obviously worked.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
Yeah, that's a pretty great reference there, isn't it? So, yeah, interesting. Okay, so we've talked a bit about, I mean, we kind of covered confidence, but perhaps you'd like to talk a bit more about how you built your confidence and how you managed to then go and perform on what is, in a lot of respects, it is the biggest stage in the world, isn't it? The Olympics. I mean, I don't know the actual figures, but I assume it is.
We'll go with that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think confidence, in my mind, there are 4 pillars that make confidence, and it's ourself, other people, our past success, and our preparation. So we can put in the work and prepare, and that builds success. We can look back and remember all the times that we've done this before and been successful, and that's going to build confidence for us. We can lean on others and have others build us up, and that gives us some confidence. And the most important one in my mind is ourself, because in the moment when we are literally stepping up to the plate on international television and it's a pressure-filled situation, we are the only thing we can control in that moment, and the only thing we can pull our confidence from in that moment. And so what I did in order to be able to perform on that stage was work on myself, work on my mindset, do breath work away from the field, practice my self-talk, have solidified routines that I practiced in practice and pulled into games, and set myself up through all of these steps and all of these small things that I did every day in order to be able to be in the moment and trust myself and be there for myself. One of the strategies I used was years leading up to Tokyo to practice bringing my heart rate down, to practice releasing the tension from my shoulders, to practice breathing deeply through that anxiety and putting myself in a place. I literally would be sitting on the airplane in the air, in the turbulence, and thinking to myself, could I have an at bat right now? And getting myself to a space where I could. And so that practice of working through those other moments of anxiety allowed me to step onto the field in a big moment, in a pressure-filled situation where my heart was pounding, and bring myself back down to earth and be able to perform. So a lot of different strategies outside of the field that, ultimately lead to that moment of being able to perform.
I know we've already talked about this, and I guess you don't have anything to compare it to, but do you think it would have been more or less stressful if there was an audience there as well?
Honestly, I don't know that it would have mattered, because our team we'd played in full stadiums, we'd played in empty stadiums leading up to the games, just very different environments. And I think, I would often practice with crowd noise going on, just like on a YouTube video on my phone, and put myself in those situations, even in training environments. And it ultimately comes down to the focus in the moment. And so I don't know that it would have impacted our performance in one way or another.
Fair enough. So a double-barreled question for you now. What was the best thing about being in the Olympics, and what's your favorite thing about what you do now?
The best thing about being in the Olympics was thinking about all of the young girls who play softball and can now see us on that stage and turn the TV and see that they could have a dream too. And I don't know, when I was young, there wasn't softball on TV. And, ultimately my dream was to be in the NHL, to play hockey with the men, because that's what I watched on TV. That's all I knew. And so just really reflecting on how impactful for softball it was to be back on that stage, and how impactful it is for this next generation of softball players to have visible Olympians and visible softball on TV and be able to dream that dream and see themselves on that stage in the future. So I think that is really, most of us on the team were reflecting and thinking about how amazing it was for the game to be there, and how amazing it was for the next generation of kids, and how much we would have loved to be able to watch all the softball that's on TV right now and meet so many Olympians and be inspired by them to enhance those dreams. And then now, I think what I really love now about what I'm doing is how many people I'm getting to meet, and the incredible stories that I'm hearing from people. And often, comparison is such a real thing. And especially with social media right now, it's like in our brains, all we do is compare ourselves to each other. And so often when I meet people, they will start sharing a story with me and say, well, it's not the Olympics or anything. And I just want people to understand that it's not about comparing to my journey. It's not about comparing to the Olympics. It's everybody has such a cool story and such unique experiences and such amazing successes and things that they've overcome in their lives. And that's what I really enjoy about what I do now, is connecting with people, learning their stories, and really figuring out and helping them figure out even a little bit more about themselves and how they can continue to be successful in their lives.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk a bit more about leadership then. So I've got a few questions for you on this one. First one is, what's the biggest leadership lesson that you've learned in your career so far?
The biggest leadership lesson I've learned has to be that there is no best style of leadership. I think that so often when people step into a leadership role, there isn't much support on leadership. And so what the default is to think about, what is leadership? Who has been a good leader in my life, and what have they been like? And can I emulate that? When leaders are authentic, when they lean into who they are and what their strengths are and leverage those, that's when we see incredible things happen. And so I think that has to be the most powerful thing that I've learned, is that anyone can be a leader. Anyone can learn how to lead. There isn't one personality that makes a good leader. There isn't one style that makes the best leader. And yes, there are things such as communication and, being able to connect with other humans and being able to share what the values are and have that clarity. There are things that can enhance leadership, but just that idea that there isn't one leadership style.
I agree with you. I think context is one of the most crucial aspects, I think, of successful leadership, is being able to flex to the circumstance, to the individuals that you're dealing with. At the same time, there might be no one way of doing it. There's definitely several ways of not doing it.
Yes.
And we talked a bit earlier, didn't we, about the return to office? And that for me is one of the way a lot of leaders are handling that. It represents one of those ways of not doing it. It's that autocratic approach, that sort of, I'm in charge, I set the rules, like it or lump it, my way or the highway, and other well-known phrases. And I do think that is quite damaging to your ability to lead in the future, because people won't trust you as much. They're not going to work as hard for you if you don't respect their wishes, their thoughts, their opinions as much as your own, if not more. But yeah, definitely with you there.
Yes. And one thing actually popped into my mind as you were saying that, something that I heard from, I think from a TEDx or a video on YouTube, was when people weigh in, they're more likely to buy in. And it's such a simple phrase around what you were just talking about, the difference between a leader making a choice and saying, this is what you're doing, whether you like it or not, versus allowing people to share their opinion and share their thoughts. And even if you ultimately make the same decision, because those people have been able to voice theirs and been a part of the decision-making process, they're more likely to buy in, even if they didn't want the result that came.
Yes, definitely. And I mean, we hear that a lot when we're looking at change management and, addressing challenges or difficulties that come up. And I think it's very much, I've certainly seen that. I'm sure you have as well, but people will be more open to the change or whatever it is if they feel like they're the ones doing it, as opposed to someone else is doing it to them. And
Absolutely.
I think that's exactly what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, so opposite question then. What's the biggest mistake that a leader can make, in your opinion?
The biggest mistake, I think, is a complete lack of transparency. I think most of the time when there are problems within an organization, it is because somebody doesn't have a piece of information that they've filled in the missing pieces with negativity. I think that's our default when we don't have the information, is to fill the holes with negativity, assume the worst, and it creates so many unnecessary issues within teams and organizations. And having a little more clarity, having a little more transparency, and sometimes we're waiting for the right moment as leaders to share the information. And what is the right moment? I think the right moment is now. If we have the information, we can allow those around us to now have more clarity in making decisions moving forward, or understanding what is going to happen. So I think transparency would be my number one answer.
I like that answer, I have to say. It's one of those things, isn't it, that leaders, it's a trap we fall into. And I think particularly when there's bad news or something's not working, we're like, no, I'm just going to keep that to myself, because if I tell them, they might do something bad, or they might leave, and I don't want to take that risk. And I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of human nature there, isn't there? Because if you tell them nothing, they're immediately going to assume the worst.
Yes.
And so the outcome you're trying to avoid by not telling them, you're making it happen.
Yes, absolutely.
It's an irony there, isn't there?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and again, though, it goes back to what we were saying just now. If you involve people, if you keep them informed, if you make them feel like they're part of it instead of it's being done to them, and that's not just about change in this example, is it? It's first of all, they'll be more bought into it, and second of all, they'll work harder, they'll produce better outputs if they know more, it's back to context again. Tell them to go and, I don't know, make that widget, whatever it is. Okay, they might do it. They're not going to put their best effort in though, because they don't understand what it's for, why they're doing it, how that widget fits into the big machine that is being produced by the whole business. Whereas if they do understand that, they're more likely to innovate, find better ways of doing it, do it faster, produce more of them, and so on and so on and so on.
Yes, and feel valued.
Absolutely, yeah. And all of that, I think, it's cyclical, isn't it? It's kind of self-fulfilling almost.
Yes, absolutely.
What would you say, or what advice would you give to someone who's promoted to a leadership role for the first time? What's the first thing they should do?
I think when leaders are thrown into leadership positions, their first move, if their first move is to connect with everyone around them and gain insight from everyone around them, I think it would provide so much insight for them into how to move forward. I think often when we are promoted into a leadership position, we think, okay, now I'm supposed to have all the answers and I'm going to have all the answers. And even if I don't, I'm going to pretend that I do, and I'm going to look like I'm strong and I know what I'm doing. And just taking a moment to connect with the people around you that you are now leading, and letting them know through your actions that you are listening to them, you are hearing them, and you want to know what they have to say. And not only will that inform your next moves, it will also build trust within your organization and allow those people to have faith in you as a leader, and to know that you have their back and you have their best interests in mind, and that they're going to be a part of the process moving forward.
You've hit there on one of my probably top 3 myths of leadership that really frustrates me is this idea, this expectation that the leader has all the answers. And we've all done it. We've all felt that pressure, haven't we? Where, someone asks you a question, you have no idea what the answer is, but you're like, oh, well, I'm the leader. If I don't have an answer, they won't respect me anymore and everything's going to fall apart.
Yes.
So you just blurt out the first thing that comes into your mind, or, search around, any answer will do. This one. Yeah, this. And most of the time it turns out to be wrong. And then you spend the next 3 weeks firefighting your incorrect answer and trying to solve that problem instead.
Yes.
Whereas you could just say, I don't know the answer. What do you think? Or let's go and find out. Or I'll go and find out and come back to you. You don't have to just blurt out that response on the spot.
Yes.
As I say, it's one of my big frustrations that with leadership, mostly because I've done it myself so many times and got me into all sorts of trouble. So
Yes. Maybe the most common mistake that a leader can make.
Yeah, I think it's probably up there, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely. Top 3, top 5, definitely. Different question then, slight tangent for you. Who, and don't feel like you have to name names, but maybe just a vague idea of who it was, but who would you say has been the best leader that you've ever been led by?
I think, so I've actually talked to my college coach about this. I think so highly of her because she has reinvented herself. She has done deep dives. She's a Hall of Fame coach who is willing to look inside and see, what am I doing that I could be doing better? What blind spots do I have right now? And how can I navigate those and learn more about how to be an even better leader? And so it's not that in college I was like, wow, my coach is the best coach on the planet. Over time, I got to coach with her. I then became friends with her. I then returned to coach with her again later, a decade later, and she is still working on herself. And most leaders that I've seen in positions like that are always looking outside of themselves for the problem or the solution, and always looking outside of themselves in order to enhance their organization. And I think it's so refreshing to see someone who has achieved so much, like I said, is in the Hall of Fame and is still looking inside to figure out how to be a better leader, a better person, and therefore impact the people around her in bigger ways.
There's probably quite a strong argument that that's why she's seen so much success, isn't there?
I would think so.
Yeah, and isn't it funny as well that you don't always realise at the time that it's like that old truism, isn't it? About you don't realise they're the great times until they're gone. But
Yes.
you don't always realise it was the best lead you've ever worked for until many years later, and you look back and you realise, oh wow, that was pretty special actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so time travel question. If you could go back in time, how far back in your own life would you go, and what would you say to your younger self?
When I think about that question, I default to when was the toughest time of my life. And I think honestly, middle school was that. That was just navigating middle school was something I would never want to do again. And so thinking about that, like usually challenges are what I'm drawn to, like what's the most challenging thing? And so I think, could I go back in time to my middle school self and alter my mindset just a little bit and help, little Joey understand that the bullies in school aren't going to impact my life moving forward. The mindset that I had could be very different. I was valid. I did have a voice that I could use and start to work on those pieces of confidence that I learned to work on later in life, and to have just been able to enjoy who I was and where I was and what I was doing, instead of worrying about, am I impressing people? Am I going to have friends? And all the things that you worry about as a 13-year-old child, and just to be able to enjoy those moments moving forward and be a more confident young girl.
Yeah, I don't think there's really anyone who would want to go through school again. I think that says a lot, doesn't it, about our education systems in our various countries? Because I'm not sure what we do about that, but probably don't have time to solve that one right now.
Yeah, problem for another day.
Is there anything in your career that you would do differently if you started it over again?
Is there anything I do differently in my career? I can't say yes, unless, again, I go back to a similar answer and just say, gain that confidence or figure out how to be more confident sooner and to hone that skill. I'm a firm believer that every experience that I've had has led me to who I am and what I'm doing today. And so I have a really hard time thinking about what I would change, because how would it change what I'm doing now or who I am now? And yeah, so I'd have to say I don't think there is anything that I would change about my career. And I'm excited for the future and where I'm heading and the people I'm going to be able to impact and meet and get to know moving forward. So I'm pretty happy where I'm at.
Good. Well, pleased to hear it. I think I sit on the same side of the fence as you on that question as well. I mean, there's the silliness of those questions, isn't there? Like, who wouldn't want to do one thing differently, or that awkward conversation you wish you'd never had, that sort of thing. But I think by and large, if you're happy with where you are now, then you have to say no to that question, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah. It is fun though, and I do love time travel, so I always ask.
That's awesome.
Leadership Heroes.
Now it's time for my favourite question. It's also the last question, unfortunately. We've flown through them. So this one is called Leadership Heroes. And if you had to pick one person, it could be anybody you like. They could be alive, dead, past, present, real or fictional, who in your opinion would perfectly embody leadership. Who would that person be and why?
I have to select Michelle Obama for this question. And I would choose Michelle because I think she has not wavered from who she is as a person in everything that she's done. She has stepped up when she needed to. She hates politics, and yet her husband wanted to be the president of the United States. And so she stood by him and led in ways that she didn't want to lead, had conversations she didn't want to have, but stepped up into that role for a bigger purpose. And since then, I know she's had so much pressure from people to run for president herself, but she hates politics. And so she hasn't. And she's stayed true to who she is and what she believes, and has impacted so many people in incredible ways. And it's hard to describe, but if you haven't read her books, I highly recommend listening on audiobook, because she actually reads her own books to you, and to hear the emotion and the passion and the raw energy that she gives through her stories. It's pretty incredible to get that insight into a public figure's life. And I just have so much respect for who she is, what she's all about, and how she leads. And yeah, so Michelle Obama.
It's a good pick, definitely. And I think you get bonus points because I'm not sure anyone's picked her before. So
yes,
there you go. Yeah.
Awesome.
The competitive streak comes out, I'm sure. Yeah, I think what's particularly impressive with her is that she wasn't interested in doing any of those things, but she did it anyway. And at the same time, faced some pretty horrible criticism from certain parts of her own country.
Yes.
Yeah, and also totally sympathise with hating politics. Like,
yep.
but it reminds me, I don't know if you're familiar with Douglas Adams and The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So it's quite a British book, but I recommend reading it because it's kind of funny. It's not serious, but it's funny, and it has some quite interesting lessons in there and parallels to the real world. And one of those is about like the highest political office. And the point he makes in that is that nobody who actively seeks it or wants to do the job should be allowed to do it, because the very act and the ego involved in going for it makes you unsuitable to do the best job in that job for the people. And that always, every time I see political news from any part of the world these days, I mean, we're certainly not doing much better in the UK. It always makes me think of that. It's just like, do you know what? If we had people in there who didn't really want to be doing the job because they didn't want the status, and actually they cared more about the common good and what's best for the wider population, then maybe we wouldn't be in many of these difficulties that we keep finding ourselves in.
Yes. What an interesting perspective. And I think so true. And often with those big leadership positions, whether it's running a country or running an organization, when it's ego driven, it often goes south. When it's for the people, for the impact, it's such a different experience.
Absolutely. And then when you look at the reluctant leaders, they're quite often some of the best ones in history that stand out and are remembered as doing good. Not always, but quite often. Yes. Anyway, Douglas Adams, of course, took it to the extreme sci-fi comedic result and had brainwashing and people getting their memories wiped and all sorts of silliness. But the core of it is a good point, I think.
Yes.
Anyway, well, Joey, it's been lovely meeting you. It's been a lovely conversation as well. I think the only thing I have left to ask you is if any of the listeners want to learn more about you, perhaps reach out or explore working with you, where can they go to find out more?
Awesome. Yes. I think the most simple answer for that is my website, joey-lie.com. There are ways to get in touch with me through there and learn more about all the things that I'm up to now. So thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. It was a wonderful conversation, and I enjoyed the journey that you took me on through your questions, and I'm excited to see the final product.
Great. Well, thank you again for being here. It's been, as I say, great to meet you, and awesome conversation. And are we going to see you in the future Olympics, do you think, or is that definitely behind you now?
Well, I am on staff with Team Canada now, so we're back in, softball's back in for 2028 in LA. So my hope is to be there as a staff member. If I am not, I will be there as a fan.
Awesome. Great. Well, thank you again so much for your time, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Same to you.
Well, listener, I hope you enjoyed that conversation and were able to pluck a few lessons out of it. Joey, thank you again so much for your time today. Really enjoyed that conversation and the different and unique perspective that you're able to bring to the table. Listener, if you would like to learn more about Joey, perhaps reach out, get in touch. And I always do encourage you, as you know, to click on all of those links in the episode description. Go and learn more. And I'm sure Joey would love to hear from you. Thank you so much for being with us today. Really appreciate every listen, every download. And I hope you'll be with us again next week when I'll be joined by an engagement and retention expert by the name of Clifton Savage. So we'll be talking about more team building ideas, the perils and nuances of recruitment and staff retention, plus how and why you should take a service-first approach to your leadership. And a final thought I'll leave you with before we go today. If you are one of those new leaders, a first-time manager, a first-time founder, or somebody who has been in the business world for a while, but you're starting to grow a team for the first time, and you're hitting some struggles with that, perhaps you're feeling that loneliness and isolation of leadership that we've spoken about a few times on the show. If any of that is the case, or if you're facing other challenges as a leader and you're looking for help, you're looking for support, or perhaps you can see the benefit of community, then good news. As you know by now, if you've listened before, there is such a thing as the Integrity Leaders online leadership community. It works alongside this podcast. It's a membership. It's a monthly, very small monthly fee. Currently, you can get the first 2 months for free. So there's really no risk to joining and seeing what you think. So come along, visit www.leadernotaboss.com and sign up to learn more. That's all from me today. Thank you again so much for listening. I will be back next week. I hope you will be as well. And until then, be a leader, not a boss.